One of the main reasons why I was so interested in pest control was I had a 5, 10, 15-year vision, and that vision didn't include me spraying houses every day, all day. So what did that mean? I got into an industry on purpose, and I love the pest control industry, don't get me wrong. But I got into that industry knowing, hey, I'm not going to have this fascination with spraying houses, so it's going to be easier for me to replace myself. Lawyers really struggle with that. And practicing law is fun, it's challenging, it requires a high level of skill. It's using ideas and experiences and, our educations and all these things. And so I feel like sometimes that can be a little bit of a hang up.
Well, hello and welcome to another guest interview here on the Profit with Law podcast. I'm your host, Moshe Amsel, and I've got a treat for you. It's not just a law firm owner, it's also a serial entrepreneur, investor, wealth builder, business growth expert. I mean, this guy is a jack of all trades, but no, really, he's got a ton of knowledge when it comes to business growth, business expertise, and I'm excited to jump into a conversation with him and sink our teeth into what makes a business tick. Maybe we talk about the difference between being an attorney versus being a law firm owner, and maybe the different things you need to think about as your business is growing. Let me quickly introduce you to Allan Draper. Allan's a serial entrepreneur, investor, wealth builder, business growth expert, and attorney, specializes in motivating entrepreneurs to make short-term sacrifices to build their businesses and wealth. He's contributed to the success of numerous startups. He's got a whole list of them. I'll just list a couple: Proof Pest Control, Lizard Marketing, Ernst Brown and Draper. Allan's diverse industry experiences, successes, and even failures have led him to become a mentor and coach to business owners and entrepreneurs. Allan's passion for wanting others to succeed is a driving force for him, and this has led him to offer business consultations, legal reviews, and financial planning services to other entrepreneurs and businesses for free. More importantly, and this is the most important because everyone knows, love family, love kids. When Allan is not playing sports or coaching one of his 3 children, Maddox, Jackson, and Olivia, he enjoys reading, playing golf, and fly fishing. Can't say I've done either of those last 2 things, but I love reading too. Allan's married to the love of his life, Juliana. Allan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Moshe, thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. So, I don't even know where to start, but maybe we just start with you just sharing a bit of your backstory, because there's so much going on there, and I'm just curious about the journey itself. So if you just take a few minutes, just kind of introduce yourself to our audience. I read the official bio, but give us the story of just kind of like transition from, I mean, I think you own your own law firm, right? So you started your law firm, you built it to a place where you're no longer really active in it, and you also a serial entrepreneur, you're building these other businesses, but now you're also helping people grow their business. So just give us a little bit of the what happened, how that happened, kind of, introduction.
Sure. When I was really young, LA Law, this television show, was really popular. And I remember thinking, and I couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. I remember thinking like, oh, I want to be a lawyer, because they glamorized it, of course. And I kind of lost track of that as I was, going through high school and my undergrad. And then I kind of got back into it after I graduated. I decided to pull the trigger, but it was a little different as an adult, because I was looking at it from the business aspect. So I went to law school, and then I practiced for a few years, but the idea was that I would eventually own my own firm and, hang a shingle, do my own thing. But my career path took me down this kind of side street, and I ended up starting a pest control company. So I was practicing law, Phoenix, and packed up my family, moved to Detroit, Michigan, and we started a pest control company there. So one week I was, in court with a suit on, and literally the next, I'm spraying people's houses for bugs. I was the first technician. But the idea was to build a business. I'm really entrepreneurial in my personality. And, fast forward, what was it, 7 or 8 years, I had a couple of friends from law school, much smarter than me in pretty much every way. But they reached out and they said, "Hey, Alan, can we borrow a couple of bucks and can you help us with the business side? I think we're going to start a firm." And I said, "Absolutely. I won't be able to help you with the practice of law because I've been out of it so long, but I can help you build a business. The one thing is, I'm going to need equity because that's always, what I'm looking for." And they happily agreed, and that's been over 3 years now that we started our firm. Um, and I guess the rest is history. So it was a weird path to how I got my name on the door of a law firm, but it eventually happened, which is a badge of honor for me for sure.
It's interesting because I've been talking more and more about the difference between a law firm owner, a law firm investor, and an
Mm-hmm.
attorney. And I've also been talking about this idea of, if you want to grow a business, it might not be the easiest path to start it from scratch, right? Like maybe go and buy something that someone else built.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you know, our audience is law firm owners, but this could really go for anybody in any business. When we start thinking about the journey of how would I do this, sometimes it helps to take yourself out of how would I do this and say if I was if I was somebody else with wanting to start this business, what would they do? And because the example I give is if I were to want to start a law firm, and you're in Phoenix, so that you can understand, Arizona's the only state that would allow a non-attorney to be an owner in a law firm. They've got the sandbox project that they're testing out and running with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so if I were to want to start a law firm, I'm not an attorney. I'd have to go out in Arizona and start a business there. But let's just say that I was starting a law firm in Arizona. How would I build it? And it becomes suddenly obvious that the first thing I would do is hire an attorney. Can't have a law firm without an attorney in it.
Yeah.
But every other attorney out there who's starting a business doesn't think of it that way because they are the attorney. The moment that they do that, they've now ensnared themselves into being the doer. And now they're the guy doing the pest control instead of the owner of the pest control business. And I think that the faster that we can avoid doing that or get ourselves out of that role is what's really going to unlock growth. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, you've gone through this a few times. You've been the investor in a firm where you just basically provided money and some insight, and you've got equity, right? Um, what can you share with our audience about kind of the ways to think of things and how they might want to think of their law firm a little bit differently?
That's an interesting perspective, of and you're right about the Arizona law where you don't have to be an attorney to own equity in a law firm, which just changed. I think it's been over the last 5 or so years.
Yep.
I didn't know that that was only Arizona. That's news to me. I assumed that there were other states in the West that did it, especially. But um, I don't know if I were a non-attorney if I would start a law firm. Um, there's some businesses that because it's white collar and it's complicated, right? Spraying someone's bugs, it's not super complicated. Now there are complicated um, aspects of other businesses. But that being said, I did start a digital marketing agency, and I'm not a marketer,
Yep.
and some of those things are very complicated. Not to the level of practicing law, but um, I think when somebody's starting a law firm or they're building their law firm, the mentality is completely different. And in a lot of ways, and I tell a lot of people this, and I don't mean it to be offensive, but there are certain careers that don't naturally lend themselves to entrepreneurship. And the reason why is because of the mentality of an entrepreneur. I don't think physicians are really, especially like ER type physicians, because what is their day to day? It's just accidents and bad things happen over and over and over. And being an entrepreneur, you need a certain level of optimism. And I was a commercial litigator. So what was my experience with business prior to starting my pest control company? It was me seeing when businesses did not work out. One partner was suing the other. a customer was suing the business was suing somebody for not a vendor for not paying. I only saw it when things weren't working out. So I thought, well, you know, is this every business? Is what it felt like. It's like, well, it's every business that I see. So it's something that businesses, uh, that attorneys, most of them, not everybody's like this, but a lot of attorneys have to overcome. It's like, look at the sky's not falling in all cases. I need some level of optimism, or I'm not going to go after it because it's so much work. Um, and I had the high billable. I used to work for a large firm downtown Phoenix, Greenberg Traurig, right out of law school, and and there are people that love that one. I'm not one of them, right? And I don't hate on those people. I have a couple of really good friends at that firm still, and so I wanted value freedom over security. So I value freedom over security, and not every attorney does that. So if you're thinking about hanging a shingle or starting a business, or even if you already have a small firm and maybe it's just you, but you're like, hey, maybe I should hire a couple of attorneys. Every step that you get toward like freedom, right? Because, and what I mean by that is, if I hire an attorney, I don't have to be there every day doing every billable, right? I have help so that I can do other things. But every step towards freedom is maybe a half step away from security.
Yeah, it's interesting because this conversation could be had in two different lights, right? It could be had around growing your law firm, but it could also be had around the people who, maybe you've got your law firm to a certain level of success, you're throwing some cash off and you're trying to think about, okay, what else can I do, right? The stock market is there. It's going to do 10, 12% annually over time, but if you want to do more than that, if you want to have more excitement, you want to do something else, you want to have a side gig or something that you're doing, in addition, right? Maybe you want to start investing in some other things. Maybe you want to do a bug spray company, right? Or I mean, I know for me, I'd love to own an auto shop, right? Not auto body, but like like a Midas or a Mavis kind of deal, right?
Gotcha.
Um, and I've been following this girl Cody Sanchez over on YouTube.
Yeah.
Sure, you're familiar with her.
Hmm.
And she talks about, owning laundromats and stuff like that, like or plumbing businesses, really like, run of the mill, what you would find at trades around, around your neighborhood. Um, and I think if you start to think about those opportunities and you start to think like, how would I evaluate that business if I was looking to buy one? It can really help you to think differently about the business that you're running. And when we're running the day-to-day operations in our business, we're so deep into it that we're not looking at that high level stuff. But the stuff that really measures how you're doing, that someone else is going to look at if they're evaluating your business, that's really what we should be monitoring. It's really what we should be watching. And so many people just ignore that. And we call what we're doing a business, but is it really, right? Or are we just going through the motions, but we're actually just somebody with a glorified job with a paycheck, or some people are not even getting the paycheck.
Yeah, I that's an interesting point, and I've ruffled a few feathers with this opinion of mine, but I feel like it's a little stronger than an opinion, and that is, if and there's nothing wrong with it, right? If you build a business and you're the only one that works there, you didn't create a business, you created a job. You're a solopreneur, which is fine. That's, in a lot of cases, that's what they want to do. They have more control than they did previously. Although in the beginning, they'll definitely have less. But, that's not a business. I'm sorry. Because what can you sell? I always look at it as the aspects of the business are what you could sell and walk away from. And if you're the only one that works there, you're not selling anything. Maybe you know, do something with your client list, or I don't know.
Yeah, it is interesting. I grew up with a dad who was what we would call a serial entrepreneur, but I like to say he was a serial solopreneur. He could never
Hmm.
work well with others. Like it was, he always did his own thing. And there were so many things. I mean, we had a flower shop in our basement. We had a gold refinery in our basement. We reassembled, board games and fax machines because he had a closeout business. I mean, the things that went through the house when I was growing up was pretty impressive, and a lot of skills that I acquired along the way. But one of the things that I watched him do and I couldn't understand is like, you're doing all these things, but why do you keep doing them? Like why is it never growing beyond yourself? He once got involved in this software business, this Jewish software business. That was the only time that he had people working for him, but he couldn't like it wasn't for him. Like he moved on to the next thing because it just, he didn't like working with people, managing people, overseeing what they were doing. Um, and so to your point, like, yeah, that works for him, right? Like right now he's an Access database developer. He gets these contract gigs and he earns a nice living, but it's
Hmm.
just him. He's got to go to work every day in order to make that happen. What we do here at Profit with Law is we help law firm owners grow beyond themselves. So if somebody just wants to be a solo, they want to get the most out of it, we're not the right business for them to come
Yeah.
to, because that's not what we do. It's not to say it's wrong. To your point, it's, there's nothing wrong with it. But most people, when they start their law firm, I don't know that that's what they want. I think a lot of people really want the life of somebody who's not the one doing all the work. And in order to do that, in order to get there, you have to bring on the person who's going to do it. In Michael Gerber's,
Exactly.
language, we can say the technician, right? You have to bring on
Hmm.
the technician. In a law firm, that is the attorney, right? And so many people say, oh, yeah, when I get to this level of revenue that would justify me bringing on an attorney, that's when I'm going to do it. And the problem is that they never get there. Because if you're trying to do as a solo what an attorney on your staff would do, it's impossible. You're just not going to have enough time in the day. So, how do you help people navigate that? Like getting past the I'm the doer to I need a doer on my team.
Yeah, I think there's different levels. So everybody comes to me, "Hey, Alan, I want to build a business," and then there's a group of people that will never take a step in that direction. Then there's a subset that they'll kind of start trying, and maybe they'll have a side hustle or start a solopreneurship or something like that. Maybe they won't. And then there's the people that just go for it, and they can walk away from kind of these technical aspects. One of the main reasons why I was so interested in pest control was I had a 5, 10, 15-year vision, and that vision didn't include me spraying houses every day, all day. So what did that mean? I got into an industry on purpose that and I love the pest control industry, don't get me wrong, but I got into that industry knowing, hey, I'm not going to have this fascination with spraying houses, so it's going to be easier for me to replace myself. Lawyers really struggle with that. And practicing law is fun, it's challenging, it requires a high level of skill, it's using um, ideas and experiences and our educations and all these things. And so I feel like sometimes that can be a little bit of a hang up. And you made, by the way, a great book recommendation, and that's called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. I'm almost positive he has an E-Myth for lawyers. I know he has a bunch in different subsections, accounts, whatever. I'm pretty sure he has one for lawyers, but just the general book, E-Myth, it talks about a baker and how she just loved baking. So she hangs a shingle, but she doesn't have time for baking anymore because she's doing the payroll. She's ordering the food supply. She's keeping the equipment up to date. She's doing the marketing, building the website, all these things. And so as attorneys, that can be a trap. And I say trap only in the sense that if it's somebody that's like, hey, I want to build a business, not a job. I want to build a business. And I've seen this with my partners, and they're awesome, but they struggle in some sense with taking a step back and letting somebody else step in. Now, I just wrote a book, and the entire book is the idea of there's 13 sacrifices that we have to make in order to build a successful business. One of those sacrifices is control. A lot of attorneys, they have a hard time hiring somebody because they want the control, they want to be the technician, and in a lot of cases, they're just better at it. And that's okay because 80% done by somebody else is better than 100% done by you if you're trying to build a business. So these sacrifices that I talk about, on the other side of the sacrifice is this huge benefit. But you have to go through the sacrifice first, just like anything else, just like how we went through law school. Man, some of those days were terrible, right? Hated my contract class. I really struggled with it. But it's like, okay, this is the sacrifice that I'm paying, that I'm making right now for the benefit at the end. And it's the same with building a business. But the reason why I wrote the book is I didn't know these things. No one shared them with me. And so it's like, hey, if I were starting over, if I'd never built a business, what are the things that I'd want to know? And so it's these things like, hey, by the way, before you have the blessing or this benefit of being financially secure, you're going to go through some financial hard times when you're first starting your business, some financial uncertainty. So I go, step by step through these 13 sacrifices, but certainly lawyers have a really hard time blowing up a business because they just enjoy practicing law. They love being in the weeds. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It just depends on 5, 10, 15-year goals that you have.
Yeah, what I mean, what are the typical five? I mean, 5, 10, 15 years. Like, I mean, it sounds great, right? But the reality
Mm-hmm.
is like nobody can see that far in the future, right? We think we can. We think we know what we want. I think it's really like what is the ultimate end goal? Like how do I know I've arrived, or how do I know I've achieved or accomplished what I wanted? Even that's a moving target because um, when we get there, we decide that we want something else, right? Or we've achieved that. Now what? So now there's a new target or a new goal. Um, but I think for a lot of people when they're first starting out with entrepreneurship or owning their own business or growing their law firm, whatever uh, stroke of paint we're going to use, I think for most people initially they're trying to just get a certain amount of time freedom and financial freedom in their lives. And once they achieve that, then they're like, okay, then I'll be able to focus on maybe my legacy items or what else, what are the cool things that I'd like to accomplish. Um, and and I think if we think in terms of that, right? Just financial freedom and time freedom. I mean, those things go hand in hand, right? If you have financial freedom, then you can buy someone else's time, and you should have time freedom, right? So where do you think that is? Like, at what level of business do you think somebody should feel financially and time free? Like what level of revenue or profit or income? I know it's going to be different for everybody, but not vastly.
Yeah, what's funny is that I have this saying that that when you start a business, first you do what you have to do, then you do what you're good at, then you do what you want to do. And so you I don't necessarily believe that you've ever made it because for me, it's not about there being an end. For me, it's about the process. It's like, hey, how am I growing? How am I developing? How do I feel about like work every day? Am I excited to get up? That's what matters to me. And if you get those things right, your results are going to be crazy. So, but in terms of financially, it's like, and that will vary. I I live off of very little, even though a 1%er or probably even above that. Because I never really did it for the money. I did it for the freedom. And you're absolutely right. Uh, Time and money go hand in hand, but there's so much variation because some people are like, well, yeah, but I want a yacht to be free. And other people are like, look, man, I just want to kind of travel and, take my RV. And so it really depends on the personal level, but on the business level, it's really simple. Is my business growing without me? Do I have the financial resources so that it grows? And that bottom line, it's got to be healthy. I've got to be netting 20+% without me. That's another thing is that a lot of attorneys think, well, look at, my net profit, but they're not paying themselves anything. It's like, well, no, because if you left, you're going to have to pay somebody to do your job. So if your firm is growing, and that's, you know, the reason why I say growing is because if it's not growing, it's dying, and we definitely don't want that. But it doesn't have to be doubling in size every year, but it has to be growing. And if it's growing and it's making a profit, I think that's when you've made it. And then the only variables are okay, well, how am I living personally in terms of financial resources? And then what does growing look like? I've never been the guy to build a business that, yeah, we grow 2 to 3% a year. That's boring. That's not going to get me out of bed. Even with our law firm, like is scaling quickly. Just hired another attorney yesterday, always hiring, but that's a personal thing because it carries with it inherent risk. Every time you're changing and growing, there's inherent risk, but there's also risk in not doing that, right? Because the firm would just kind of wither away if you don't, you're not trying to build it. So, um, but finding that balance for you is what is most important. Have those conversations with your spouse, like, hey, what do we need to make so that we're comfortable? We can do what we want with the kids. We can travel, all these things. And the cool thing about doing that is that everything above that, you can invest, into something public or reinvest into the firm so that it grows. It just gives you a bunch of leverage because most people, when they make more money, they just spend it, and that's just not my approach. And I kind of wanted to touch real quick. You were talking about 5, 10, 15-year goals. And you're absolutely right because we get on this path and then we're like, oh, wait, now I don't want to do that. The most important thing about having those long-term goals, and I call them vision sometimes because I like to envision, hey, where am I going to be? Is because early on, stuff sucks so bad. You're starting a firm and like you're not making very much money and you're in a crappy office and your clients are like, wait, how long have you been doing this? And so it's nice to have something like, hey, this isn't going to be like this forever. But you're absolutely right. So it's really we want this vision in our head of where we're going to be, mostly to get us on the path, to get us moving in the right direction. But by no means does that mean like head down. Life happens. Kids grow up and partners come and go, employees quit, do crazy things. So it's like you use that as like, hey, that's kind of my North Star. So I'm kind of heading in that general direction, but I'm not, it's not written in stone.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to that. I'm a big fan of having goals, having visions. Um, the few things that you mentioned. I mean, one thing is that there is no end result or end game, right? Simon Sinek wrote a whole book about that. The name of the book is The Infinite Game, and it's all about this
Mm-hmm.
idea that in sports, every game has an end, right? There might be some overtime period, but at some point it comes to an end. I see all the sneakers behind you and the football helmets. So figure sports is a hot topic for you. I love that book. Great book by Simon Sinek. And another idea that he shares is this concept of this long-term visions are that, right? It's visions, but if you're actually trying to create goals, you got to have something closer, something that's achievable, that you can measure the success and you can
Mm-hmm.
and you can get it. So I want to make sure that you know I've heard these stories of like, somebody wanted a Porsche, right? So they put a picture of a Porsche in their visor, and every time they got in the car, they started driving, put the visor down, they saw the picture in front of them, and then, all of a sudden, a year later, they're driving a Porsche, right? And that's the reticular activating system, right? And so we hear these different things, these different concepts or ideas, and some of them sound real and some of them don't. But at the end of the day, and this is the way that I work with my clients, and maybe this is what you do with yours too. I'm not sure. Um, is we have to have an actionable project that we're working on the next 90 days. Like we need to have absolute focus on what we're doing next to grow our business. So in order to do that, we have to know where we're going so that we can clearly articulate the path to get there and then decide what is the most important thing to do in that path. And that's what we're going to execute on first.
I like that.
And, so if we, if we try to look beyond 90 days, even that's going to change because we may succeed in the next 90 days in accomplishing this project. We may not. We might
Mm-hmm.
have to regroup, might have to readjust. So, I think it's really important to have the big picture vision to know what you're trying to build. So know if you want 100 attorney practice with, a national footprint, or if you want a 4 attorney office, like know that because you got to know what direction you're headed in. But if you're trying to just get to a four attorney practice and kind of settle in there and get comfortable, nothing wrong with that. But get really clear about what does that look like, and then that's the path you're marching on. So I do think that the long-term vision is important. Um, but I also think that a short-term plan is different, and we really need to get clear on what that short-term plan is.
Yeah. No, I definitely like that. The vision is that's kind of, it's this landmark that you see off in the distance. And this short term plan that you're talking about is in a quarter mile turn left, right? So both are necessary. That short term plan, I like that idea, that 90 days, just because it gives you, you have to have small wins. You have to feel like you're making progress, that not everything is looking, down the road, 30, 50 miles. You need to be in the here and now. Um, just so that you feel like you're making progress and you're actually doing something. Because if you look, 50 miles down the road, those little steps that you're taking don't seem very significant. And I think that's important that they feel like they are.
Yeah. Cool. So let me ask you this. You're talking to a room full of law firm owners. They're growing their business. Uh, what do you think is something that's really important? When we talked about this separation of understanding the business owner versus the attorney, we talked about the vision, the goal. Um, Boots on the ground, actionable. I know that you're not doing the day to day in the firm that you're running, but just from your
Hmm.
business entrepreneurship, experience and everything, what do you think is a fundamental concept or something really important for them to dial into to achieve success? Like,
I think two main things. One is going to be your personnel. We're still having partners do stuff that they don't really need to be doing. They can hire somebody that you can pay less than their billable hour to handle mostly administrative stuff. So getting that personnel and support in place so attorneys aren't doing everything. And the second thing is financial statements. Like we need to understand the financial engine of the law firm, and we need to know like where we're at, because if you don't know where you're at and you're just trying to grow, you could be doing things to make it worse for the firm, like make the financial situation worse. And it's not the end all be all of a firm, but it's important, right? These aren't nonprofits where we can operate at a loss or whatever. We have donations coming in. Like our people depend on us for payroll every couple of weeks or whatever the cadence is. So we have to know the financial statements. We have to know that, hey, whatever marketing efforts I'm making, that there's actually an ROI on those marketing efforts, that we're paying our people a competitive wage, but it's not causing undue financial pressure on the firm. So that's one thing that I've noticed is some firm owners aren't very comfortable and familiar with their financial statements, and we need to get that addressed.
yeah, it's interesting because that's my business, right? We're a fractional CFO, we're a tax accounting firm, and we see it all the time. Uh, you know, Bookkeeping's a mess. I mean, the first step is have a bookkeeper, right? Have somebody who's
Yeah.
who's getting all that stuff in order for you, but then understand what your numbers mean, and look at it. It's really, really powerful. I mean, it works at businesses of all sizes. Uh, we went into one of our fractional CFO firms that we work with, doing multiple millions of revenue annually, operating at a razor thin profit margin. We went in and we took a look at their profit and loss statement, and we just looked at like big picture, like what are the main buckets? How much are they spending on marketing? How much are they spending on people? How much are they spending on overhead? And what we found was that marketing, we should be between 10 and 15% of revenue, was up at 25%. So that's the first place we dove in. And literally within the first 90 days, we were able to identify poor performing marketing campaigns, cut them, and boosted their profit $25,000 a month
Mm.
within. I mean, it was less than that. It was like 45 days within our engagement. Anybody could do that. We're not rocket scientists, right? It's just paying attention to the numbers and understanding, like find a leaky bucket and then plug the hole, right? So I think that it's true. That's what people need to understand. A lot of business owners don't even know where to start when it comes to understanding those. And I think that your experience in having multiple businesses that you've worked in or supported has really helped you to build that. Um, but it's something that everybody kind of needs to learn. You needs to get familiar with. And if you need help doing that, then let us know. Maybe we should put together a little YouTube video for you. Or, but I'm sure there's a ton out there, but maybe nothing law firm specific. So we can totally do that for you guys.
And that's such a good point because I taught myself corporate finance with YouTube videos, and I bought a corporate finance textbook, and I didn't know anything about it either. I didn't know, I didn't even understand the significance of financial statements and what they meant when I started my first business. And so it's all self-taught. Now, I'm not at a CPA level or a CFO level by any stretch, but I have learned and myself how to make decisions in a managerial role based off of what the P&L is telling me. And even though I outsource a lot of things, I have in-house CFOs for most of my companies, and I have a CPA that takes care of everything. So I'm not saying do all of this on your own, right? That's the opposite of what I'm saying, because we talked about how you don't want to be a technician. If you do the the financials, and you're in the weeds all the time with the financials in your business, you're just a different type of technician. Now, instead of, billables, now you're, doing those types of things all day. But you have to understand it so that you can make decisions about it. You have to understand it at that level. Um, that's the difference between being an attorney and owning a law firm. An attorney doesn't need to know that stuff. An attorney doesn't need to know, hey, how do I how do I best question somebody when I'm interviewing them for a position? Like, and some attorneys do for their firms and stuff like that. But when the rubber really meets the road, when you're a business owner, and that's going to affect the bottom line. So there's all these things that you have to learn how to do, that you don't as a just practicing lawyer.
All right, Alan, our time is up, which is so much fun here, but it passes so quickly. But just want to close out the show with two things. Number one, what's your parting piece of advice or wisdom for our audience? Number two, how can people learn more about you, get in touch with you, maybe get your book, and wherever you want to send them?
Yeah, I think number one is clarify what you really want. A lot of people think they want to build a business, and then they find out that they don't. And it's not for everybody. So as you're building your law firms, you mentioned having a firm with 100 attorneys. To me, that would be a nightmare. That's a lot bigger than what I would want to do with my law firm. But some people do that, obviously. So being clear, because at each level of growth, know that your problems aren't solved. Your problems are changed. Now you have new problems. So try to get clear on that, and then when you do get closer to it, then you'll know. Because it's tough to say, well, I don't know, maybe I do want 100 attorneys when you don't have any that work for you. And then you have five, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can barely handle these five. So, and that's okay. So make sure you understand like where you're headed, that, getting some of those long-term goals clarified. And people can reach me. I'm active on social media. Instagram, I'm at real Allan Draper. I have a website, allandraper.com. I'm releasing my book in a couple of months, and it's not available right now, but will be then, and there will be information all over. So I'm not too hard to find online.
Well, that one thing that you shared is really true, and we have a book that we give to our coaching clients when they join in one of our coaching programs, and it's called Living Forward. It's written by Michael Hyatt and Daniel Harkavy, and this book takes you through creating your life plan. So it looks at all of the domains of life, not just business, to really get clear about what it is that you want. And one of the really powerful exercises in there is they have you write your own eulogy.
Mm,
And it is extremely powerful to really think of it
mm,
in that way. I mean, that book is part of why I started this business.
mm,
It's, it made me realize that I was in IT, and I realized that I didn't want to be known for resurrecting servers from ransomware in the middle of the night. And there was something more in life that I wanted, or more in the world that I wanted to bring. So that's, it's really powerful. Go pick it up, read it. It's not just a read, right? You got to follow it and do the exercises of the book. But I think it'll really help people to get that clarity. And Allan, I really appreciate you being here, folks. We're going to link up everything that we discussed in the show notes. So if you look at your podcast player, it should be there, or in your YouTube channel, under this YouTube video, everything should be listed and linked. But if it's not, go to profitwithlaw.com, and all of our episodes are there, with a summarized write-up on what was discussed, as well as a resources section that has all of the links and everything that you need to get to where you want to go. We're here every single Thursday with a brand new episode. And if you enjoyed this one, you want to make sure that you're subscribed so you get notified the next time that we release a new episode, which will be in 1 week. And you could do that in a podcast player or on your YouTube channel. We look forward to talking to you again next week. Take care.